Hello and welcome. Welcome to day number 2. This is your host K22, programmed and designed by Sheevs for this Embroider versus challenge. Thank you for showing up for our second session as we tackle our very first assignment that we've been given. Let's get out of this transport hallway, head on over to the studio and exactly explain why we're here today and what we'll be taking on as we move on. And so the program today is Hatch Embroidery. If you've watched episode 1, the premise is it's an Embroider versus challenge against ourselves. If you have Hatch yourself, follow along. There is a 30-day free trial still currently available. And the whole goal of this is to simply attempt to see what can we digitize compared to what the computer digitizes automatically. Is there any more detail that we can add in comparison to what computer can add? There is plenty of archived footage, archived items taken from the deep lore that Sheevs has given us. So let's head on over to our in-game software. Once again, this is Hatch Embroidery Day 2, and you're here with your host K22 for SheevsEmporium. And so as this scene loads, just to recap, let's go ahead and zoom on out over here. This is our cover page from our episode 1, volume 1. Minimize some of these screens here. Volume 1, 1992-94 from the Legend series. What we've done is taken one specific concept item, art item, and this was day 1's results. Now as we move through the rest of these colors here, today we're going to be moving on to the remainder of the helmet, which is the white. We'll add in some of this lighter blue, come back in with some black detail, blue highlights, and then the moment that we've all waited for, right over here to the left side of the screen, the auto digitize function. We'll simply select our reference image and compare it to what we've done. And on day 2, the whole goal is to look back from day 30, day 45, even if we do a second round, third round, as we start to grow from this channel. And what are the upper limits of what we can push on digitization? Currently, our stitch count is at 40,856 stitches. To put it in perspective, this is a 5.5-inch item. It would already exceed most production facility standards and/or limits, rather. Currently capped at 15 to 25,000 depending on vendor and production item. For an art-inspired item such as this may be a one-off. Sheevs has considered some items such as sweaters for the upcoming fall. Now, K22, you're a droid. How would you know? Certain programming has allowed me to feel certain things. So as we move on, let's go ahead and minimize these design information. Let's pick our color and jump right on into digitization. We'll make sure that 13 is selected. In this instance, 13 is our cream color, which is what we're going to go with closer to this white of the portion of the helmet. We're going to go into digitize, straight into digitize closed shapes. And as we zoom in, one of the new aspects that we've done, let's go ahead and hide every single item that we've digitized so far. And what that'll do is allow us to have a clean slate We've locked this initial reference image, so it will not shift on us. And we're starting top to bottom, left to right. And there we go. We are on our way already, digitizing today at a much quicker rate. Thank you so much for joining us again for day number 2, for considering a subscription to this channel as we bring a few items now. A pause for reflection as we follow the helmet, but since we're going to be adding the black detail on top, as the music cuts out here as it thinks even more, let's go ahead and just include it. Now, we're roughly and loosely following embroidery concepts, and the whole idea is to practice, 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 and show Sheev that this concept is viable. And there's some items from the archived images that we found online that have never been made before, never been attempted at digitization. And that's why we're here. Now let's go ahead and cut that here, and we'll cut back because again, we're layering the black on top of this, so we're not too concerned with catching every line. We'll have to ask for some upgraded processing so that way there's not as much pause in between. But also, here we go, we'll center mouse click. That finishes up that section. Good, 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 good. Let's go ahead and move on to this next portion of white below. Don't be afraid to zoom on in with the mouse wheel. So to finish the earlier thought, we're not going to be removing layers just yet. It's possible that day 20, day 30, as we get closer to the conclusion of round 1, it's anticipated that we'll be following a little bit closer. But the main goal for this series, familiarity with the program and extending our capacity, which has been programmed again. Let's see. And just like that, the white portion is completed. Now, since we listed all of our colors here to the right, our next selected color is going to be 66. So as we prep for our next color, we'll go ahead and minimize these next items that we just did. We'll hit save. And while that takes a moment to load, let's prepare for the next one. It was pick 66. Digitize closed. And this color is going to be on the ear portion and the teeth here and some bits of the pauldron. So let's start here, top to bottom, left to right. And there is the ear portion. Now, since this is the teeth area, in previous episodes that we've done this, a lot of button clicks by doing a tatami first and then switching it over to a satin. So this time We're going to default to a satin, which we can show here. It's nice and highlighted. We're still on digitized closed. We are in the correct color. Let's zoom right on in. And as we let that go ahead and proceed here, we can see that each one of them is actually a satin versus a tatami. So knowing beforehand what you're preferably looking for can also expedite some of this during our lives. And that just goes to show the progression from day 1 to day 2 already in this field. We'll stick with the satin and add this next portion there. Let's go ahead and automatically correct that angle by hitting H. You can see the angle is here, listed at 15. It may not show up on your screen. What we'll do is we'll switch the angle back over here to this side, creating this effect, following the flow of the pauldron, going back to digitized closed. Our settings are still on satin, still on the correct color. And we'll do our second and third portion of the pauldron. And there we are. As I zoom into this section here, it looks like there is a bit more color here and here in this 66 tone before we move over to 68, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. Let's go ahead and finish these up. Again, leaving it on satin. For those that tuned in on day 1, a majority of the underlayer is a standard tatami. So with adding more detail and different stitch types, this will give us more texture and meet the approval of a well-digitized item. And just like that, we are quickly moving through. Like previous, let's go ahead and select all of our colors, hide what we've performed, and then we'll go ahead and hit save. Save often and frequently in this very intensive, heavy program, which we are very thankful to be using. Now we're moving over to 63, and this is going to be a fun little section here as we add every single detail from the trees over here on the outside of the helmet, in addition to the actual helmet details. So let's go top to bottom, left to right. We'll be mixing in digitized closed, freehand closed, and freehand open. And where shall we begin? As we said, top to bottom, left to right. This is a great tool here on this side, showing the freehand close shape as it follows your input of the mouse. As long as you hold down the key, you can create any single shape, and the auto smoothing, which is right up here, can be adjusted. And look at that happy coincidence. The satin is still in effect, which is going to work out extremely well. There we go, adding more. Now there is an upper and lower limit of what can be performed in satin. At this current time, If it allows us to do it, we're going to go ahead and try it. We'll switch back over to digitize closed. And there we have the back portion detailed. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z on there. Since this item has a satin there already, which we're going to do with that very bright blue, let's go ahead and switch back over to the tatami and just redo this. We can always switch this back if we need to, but for now, let's go ahead and utilize every single portion of the program. Start right up here with a freehand open shape, switching over to a satin and pre-selecting our settings before we actually enter into our drawing. Now you may not be able to see this. This is still in inches, so we're going to switch back over to a metric format. The reason for that, now we're at 2.5 mil. Let's go ahead and go to the absolute minimum of 1. Press down our mouse and follow. This could be broken up. However, let's do one continuous shape. We go right to our first portion here, release, and we have that nice shadow break from one shade to the next. Switching over to digitize closed, we'll take care of the brow. Zooming in when we have to. And here we go. And as I glance over it, we're still on tatami, which works out perfect in this instance. As we close this area back up, top to bottom, left to right. Let's go ahead and take care of the detail on here with the freehand open shape. We're still on satin, switching back over to a single run and following this line here. Coming back around ever so slowly. Release, pick it up here, now without a tablet it requires a certain amount of dexterity and concentration, but you can do this as well, simply a bit of practice, and this too is possible. Switching over to a digitize closed, we'll take care of this shape here. So curve, curve, straight, curve, curve, straight. And what that means is selecting back and forth from our right click to our left click if you have the program in front of you. Let's go ahead and freehand close this shape here. exaggerate some areas as needed. Before we move on to the eye portion, let's go ahead and finish up the rear of the helmet. Move our way this way, come back up, then come down. There is no right or wrong, as this can all be resequenced. This is all just an attempt at this point, so there is no real concern about flow. However, being cognizant of it, it's going to help us. And what we're doing is breaking up this shape from the lower portion for the reason that we're going to click on this here, switch over to a satin, select H, correct our stitch angle. Now this angle is trying to follow it all the way through, and at this point it gets very long, so at this point we'll add a stitch angle and instruct it. As our programming catches up, we're going to instruct it to go ahead and follow this shape, and we will select the angles and input them with the final button click of the third mouse. Now we can see this flows very smoothly from top to bottom. Let's do our secondary portion. Save us some time, pre-select our tools. And that satin looks fairly decent. Let's go ahead and do the same exact thing to this one. We'll add in our stitch angles from here, here. Warning, warning. You must start and stop outside of the entire shape in order for it to register. And here, as we're done, let's go ahead and hit our center mouse, and that changed it right over to a beautiful satin that flows and follows the inner curve of this, adding just a little bit more added element on this lower portion before we switch over to digitize closed once more. Moving on. We're going to go ahead and hit save very quickly. If you are enjoying this content, thank you so much for considering a subscription as we move forward through the rest of this challenge days. If you have your own version that you found from archived reference footage, or you wish to have a link to this specific comic, which you can read for free online, send over a message and we'll link it actually in the description, so you can take a time at your leisure, possibly trace it yourself. Even without the program, you can imagine and consider what it would be like to digitize something. We're going to go ahead and keep these shapes relatively simple. Simple rectangles. And as we zoom out, you can see how they're just adding that extra layered element right on top. And the computer software is actually tying it together indicating that it would simply jump from one to the next and the next and the next. And here we are, almost halfway completed with our detailed section on the front half of the helmet. A very exciting day at this pace as we move forward to show the auto digitization function, and we will see who takes round one. If it meets the approval of Sheev, if we have to redo this. Great. Let's go ahead and move on to the center section here. Series of straight lines and curves. Switching it back over from a satin. And then adding these extra elements of detail as we pause and move ever so slowly with the mouse. It's understood that a tablet is actually going to be so much easier. And it appears the software is picking up the last item or selection of stitch type, which is completely fine. So this is a satin, but the angle is indicating that it's just too far, it's just the wrong shape. So very simply we'll hit H. And as we zoom out, you can see the greater level of detail on this. Wrap up the eye portion, mouth, front. More of this tree area. We are nearing completion. And because the eye is so relevant, let's go ahead and make sure that we capture that nice little bump if possible. Even on the top. Any little bit adds a little bit more character. Switching back over to satin. Adding the single stitch line. And if something doesn't look right, through the power of undo, we can do it again. Now, if you're following along here, our teeth were actually put in first prior to our black, which means that towards the end, we'll have to resequence this, or else we'll have an episode 6 trooper instead of an episode 4, which is the original from volume 1 in this issue. If that didn't make any sense, it's quite all right. Capture the full shape as we move up, up, and around. Freehand close next. Freehand open. Now, it's not required that we follow each and every single outline. Is this nothing more than a tracing session? Quite possibly. But in any sense, that's the only way that we are going to be able to determine what we've done compared to what the computer will do. Practice, practice, practice. Going back to a freehand closed, sticking with the tatami. This would look and do well with two different versions of satin, rather. So we'll do the first portion, roughly following. Getting a little quicker with our execution. Zooming right on in. Releasing the mouse. One vocoder done. Time for the chin. It's a slightly bigger area. Let's reduce the errors. Go back over to digitize closed, in which we can just select, select, select. Series of hard lines, soft lines. There we are. Great, 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 great. Now, here's another reason why the satin's actually much, much more improved than the tatami. It would first have to lay down a base layer, then come back over and then fill it, whereas a satin, much more efficient and creates an added level, blah, 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 blah. We'll get working on that. An added level of focus, added level of detail. Moving to the tree. Let's see what we can do with just nothing but freehand closed. Save us some steps. Let's go ahead and make sure that our selection tool reflects the stitch type that we're looking for. And we do that by hitting satin first before we enter the scene. And you may notice that the computer again auto-routing, assisting with any entry and exit points as needed. Feel free to add your own shape, simplify some. And since we omitted this trooper in our previous episode, let's finish off this tree, which you can see ends here, by adding just a bit more of these elements. Switching that angle back. Selecting our center mouse when we're done. And there we have it. As you can see, this item here, very far to stretch for a satin. It shows it as rendered, so we'll move on. With the majority of the helmet completed, let's move on over to these sections here. This would look really great in a satin, again down to that 1. Let's try a new button today, digitized open shape. In a satin. And if this works correctly, this is how we can get some very straight lines. Whereas the freehand open, you're reliant on your skill level, possibly not having a tablet. Let's go back over to a single run, capture this very long detailed line here, and here. Going back to a digitized closed, pre-selecting, switching back to a freehand closed. Let's attempt to do this long portion here. If it doesn't come out exactly, either redo it or learn to accept the character of it, which is very nice. Go ahead and join these two. Having the stitch come down, over, then back up. As I look at this image, I have put over a reference over to the right just in case we needed to check any. It looks like we have one last, if I can scroll correctly. After our black detail, let's go ahead and hide each and every single one of those that we just created. Hide and a quick save. We're going to jump in with our last color, listed as number 68. It's a bright blue, top to bottom, left to right. Adding in each and every detail over the helmet, back pauldron, front pauldron, for the final reveal, left with the actual challenge portion where we'll hit auto digitize. Let's go ahead and pick our new color. Select our tool. I'm going to be doing a series of freehand closed satins, top to bottom, left to right. We'll stay on the helmet first. Good, 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 good. We're going to break up this entire shape. Take care of the ear detail here. Switch over to our eye, imagining that the closer we can link these together, the easier that it's helping the computer to say, okay, let's go from this section to this section as we move around. And in this case, we'll come back and end up right over here towards our left. So let's go straight down, find the first one. If you're capturing what is happening here, this is an insane amount of extra detail right on top. Feel free to make as many jagged edges, use them as a guide, make your own. And when you release, there we go. Moving to the back portion here. We'll switch right over to a digitized closed. Back over to the tatami for this section, which is just a little wider, a little bigger. And with review, let's go ahead and unhide all. Selecting over here, unhide all. And there we have it. There was no countdown in 3, 2, 1. This is it. This is our attempt from K22, your host for Sheevs Emporium, as we attempt completion of day number 2. Attempting to get everything in screen. That is an insane amount of level of detail that we've added into this. Again, scrolling back up, let's go find those teeth, move them all the way down now. As we select, it highlights it for us. Simply click move to bottom. Good, good, good. We have now completed our portion. Let's go ahead and move. At the very top, we have a border outline that we will push all the way to the bottom. Now, for a 5.5-inch patch, this would look very well on a nice sweater. It looks like we lost some detail here. That's just a layering issue. There is more items. This is the bonus portion at this point. Go ahead and pick the white with a digitized, no, freehand closed. Let's zoom right into the aerator. And I believe the shape was like that. Even if it wasn't, it still adds that extra. So zoom right on in. Control Z. It's still stuck on a satin over here. Let's go back to a single run. And what we were looking for is just adding that detail there. And that is our completed portion. Before we hit auto digitize, once again, thank you so much for showing up. We're going to go ahead and start to wrap up the rest of this live here today. But before we do that, what we've all been waiting for, let's go ahead and hit save, move on over, select. Keep in mind, we are now at 60,000 stitches for a 5.5-inch patch. Even removing layers, still be likely at 40,000 plus. This is a very detailed, very intricate patch. Embroidered item. As we scroll all the way up, our second reference. Let's unlock so we can select. And let's go ahead and hit auto digitize. And so what this portion does is it considers all elements, generating stitches, which you might see to the lower left of the screen there. As we pause for suspense. As we pause for suspense. And there you have it. Fully digitized. The stitch count has now jumped to 124,000 stitches, which means that it has doubled, in fact. We'll scroll to the very top and hide our reference image so we can make a fair assessment of who wins round 1 from day 2. In the event that you cannot see this, let's move this right on over so we can get everything in one frame. And here we've exposed one of the major issues of auto digitization. It is merely nothing more than a tool to assist you for more simple items. It left the entire back half of the helmet, but if you had this on a white applique type setting, it could work out very well to create 2 different textures. But we're also looking at, look at the level of detail where the computer has added satin, where we've added satin. From this section over to the right, you got to give it to the auto digitization. That is some insane amount of detail. The trooper, you can almost make out the outline. The trees look heavily more detailed. It looks like the lower layer is also a satin. If we have any question as well, we can hit O. And if we were to select, we'd have to find it through the multiple layers that are on here. Perfect. Now if we go to properties, you can see that this black selection here, satin. That's the main reason why it has way more detail in this section in comparison to ours. So thank you so much for your participation. Let me know who wins round 1. It looks like we're going to go ahead and give it to ourselves on this one. I encourage you, let's go ahead and talk about day number 2. We'll jump back right into the studio as we tease exactly what we're going to be working on. In fact, let's go see if Sheev is at his throne room. And so please, if you have any opportunity, join us for day number 3. We are going to be taking on a new art sample. The major hint that we're going to be leaving with you is she is a princess. It is a portrait photo. Sheev must be out at the time. But we appreciate you again stopping by this Volume 2, Day 2. We are locking the vault doors now and saying goodbye, goodbye, bye.